In the darkness, nothing is off limits. Expand your perception of reality. Welcome to Blackout with Samantha, Scarlette, and Eddie Barella.
Hey guys, welcome to the June 30th episode of Blackout with Samantha, Scarlette, and Eddie Barella here on Idobi Radio. Eddie, how have you been?
Good. I sort of feel like I'm coming down with some sort of a sickness, and I kind of hear a little bit in your voice.
Yeah, I'm getting over the flu, which is it's been a shitty week for me.
What is going on?
Today's the first day I feel good.
I had friends come over on Monday, and they were sick. It's like, if you're sick, why would you go over someone's house? Stay home. Who does that?
Gosh.
That's terrible.
It's weird though, because here on the East Coast, I mean, you're out in Denver, but here in like New York, there's other people I know that have gotten sick too, and it's like, who gets the flu in June? Like, this isn't normal. I'm kind of like,
I blame chemtrails.
Yeah, I was gonna say not to hit on the government conspiracies, but
yeah, this is not normal. I don't
Speaking
know.
of government, did you see yesterday those awesome tweets from Donald Trump about somebody's facelift?
Yeah, that's all over CNN today. I saw when I was on the treadmill, and it was, I guess he said that one of the CNN, is it a reporter or something? She was at...
Or I think it was Fox News. I don't know, but I remember
now.
It
was from the Morning Joe on MSNBC.
Okay, yeah, I don't watch any of those morning shows, so I'm like, okay, I don't know what channel Morning Joe is on, but yeah, no, I saw it on Thursday morning, like on Twitter, and I'm like, what the heck is he talking about?
Yeah, he said that she came to Mar-a-Lago and like looked like crap basically after her cosmetic surgery, right?
He said that her like facelift was bleeding. I'm just like,
geez.
What president talks about this stuff?
It is a crazy time we live in.
I know.
You never know what he's going to say next. It's so weird.
Yeah, it's kind of like weirder than TMZ type of stuff, but I just was like, what the heck?
Yeah, that was really weird. But we have a good show this week.
Yes, we do.
2 really good interviews and 2 great guests.
Yeah, our second guest, speaking of government conspiracies, is Dr. Michael Salla. He has appeared, I think, at Contact in the Desert and a lot of different like UFO things. And he has written like a bunch of books about secret government space programs with extraterrestrials and Nazis and blue avians and reptilians and the Greys and just, and the Nordics. So, right. I mean, he knows all about these different alien races and their secret space programs. So I can't wait to start asking him about everything. It's going to be an interesting, crazy ride of a show.
Yeah.
But before that, I have a really special guest. I have Chris Cuffaro coming on. He is a photographer. He's done a slew of different type of photography, everything from like fashion to music. And the reason I want him to come on was to talk music. He is responsible for some of the most iconic images from the late 80s into today in rock music and pop music too. But he photographed everybody from Nirvana to George Michael, to Soundgarden, to No Doubt.
I'm going to ask him about this because if you go to his Instagram, it looks like all stock photos because every single picture he took is iconic. You've seen it somewhere.
Yeah. It's like, oh, wait, he did that. And it's like once you could start looking at his stuff and look at his Instagram, you kind of start to notice like other places. Like you'll be looking at an album cover and be like, oh, that picture of Perry Farrell, that's by Chris Cuffaro. Or like that picture of George Michael's, that's by Chris Cuffaro. Like it's like you can kind of like just tell his style because most of them are black and white. Though he does do some color stuff, but he has a very distinct, cool style. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's get him on the show.
Thank you. Can I correct you for a couple things?
Sure.
As I like to tell people. Well, here's my thing. I like being called a photographer, period. I always tell people I hate labels and as it is, but I'm just a photographer. I shoot anything and everything. Music is part of my career.
Okay. So yeah, you shoot beyond just, people. You're shooting everything, right?
I've been shooting for 47 years now, and let's put it this way, I've shot everything at least once. Just about everything.
What's the strangest thing you think?
That's a good question. All sorts of weird things I have to say. I don't know, is this show PG rated or R rated or X rated?
No, we're on Idobi Radio. It's the internet. You can pretty much say whatever you want.
Yeah, it's a hard R.
It's a hard R. Well, I've shot all sorts of things. I've been shooting girls since I was 12, naked girls since I was 17. Started shooting concerts when I was 16, and There's all sorts of things in between now and then, and I've done all sorts of fun stuff. And as my tagline for my life is, I have a million stories and the photos to prove it. So if I told you a crazy story, I guarantee I have pictures I can show you.
Did these girls know that you were taking pictures of them when you were 17?
Yeah, actually, okay. Yeah. It was quite funny back in those days. I always tell people, like, I started shooting models when I was 12 and immediately was like, oh, my God, this is the coolest thing ever. I want to be a photographer and all this stuff. And I just remember girls, 98% of my friends are women as it is. So I was always around girls to this day. And so shooting girls was so easy and so natural for me. And I always wanted to do it. So, but then I fell in love with the whole music thing, and that kind of drove me down that path.
What came first? Go ahead, Samantha.
Oh, well, I also just want to back up and say, when you said that you have pics to prove everything, so you're basically like the antithesis of that term, like pics or it didn't happen. Like, you have the pics and it did happen. But
well,
what was the
exactly, and like I always tell people, I was kind of doing Instagram and Twitter before it was invented, because now everybody records their lives.
Yeah.
But I was doing that since I was 10. And so I always tell people, I know the exact date the first time I did drugs, and
Which
I was
was?
and I have pictures from that night of me rolling on ecstasy for the first time. So, I have all that stuff, my life recorded and documented.
I'd be curious to see those.
Yeah.
No, you've shot, like, I mean, if you basically you name it, that person, you've pretty much shot it. Like, as far as celebrities go, like with rock music, it's everyone. Like, it's really kind of hard to find somebody that you haven't shot a photo of. Who was the first? Go on.
Go ahead.
Oh,
no, go ahead.
Who was the first really famous big artist that you got to shoot?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I mean, I have my timeline, because just so you guys know, I've been working on a documentary on my career for the last 3 years. So I had to do lots of research on my life and figure out, like, in a sense, my timeline. And plus, I've kept great records of everything I've ever done since I was 10. So I can tell you what I did 25 years ago today and where I was and what I was doing. So I've always kept these records. And, I've been shooting for a long time, and I've kind of kept track of everything. So my first official music shoot was this producer, Keith Forsey, who produced Billy Idol and did the soundtrack for Breakfast Club. And I met him through his girlfriend at the time, who was a Playboy Playmate. And that was my first official shoot of a musician, and then that got me to Musician Magazine, and which got me to, like, Maurice White and Wayne Shorter and Omar Hakim and George Harrison and Robbie Robertson, and so I was the West Coast photographer for Musician Magazine for 3 years, and so that opened up every door to the record labels and everybody there. So I always say to everybody, like, I've shot a lot of people, but there's a lot of people I haven't shot. Trust me. The list is probably twice as long. Like, I can give you 20 people right off the bat that I didn't shoot that I would have loved to shoot.
Have you ever been in a really big photo shoot, something that you've prepared for a really long time, but then something technical goes wrong, you don't realize it until afterwards, and you lost all these amazing photos?
Boy, you're mean. The worst thing that ever happened. There's two stories that I always tell people. Is that number one story is the worst shoot ever was New Kids on the Block in 1989, because they were just out of control and stupid, and we just couldn't take it anymore, and I just canceled the shoot. The worst big screw up was once we did a shoot, and nothing, like, we've had packs and heads blow up on us. We've lost power. We've had the strangest things happen to us. But usually, the thing about being a photographer is the one skill a photographer has, and I know I have, is a problem solver. So I can solve problems no matter how big or small. And usually the client or the subject doesn't know that something's bad's happening, but usually you can get around it. And you just solve it. You just solve it. I mean, one time I did a shoot with Charles Barkley in Atlanta, and on the way back, the film accidentally got X-ray. At least that's what my assistant said, and that film was ruined. But otherwise than that, nothing too major.
Well, that photo shoot you mentioned just a second ago with New Kids on the Block, you talk about that being the worst one you've ever done. But if you were to go back now, like, with all of your experience, you've handled a lot of famous people, a lot of difficult people. If you go back to that specific photo shoot, though, today, how would you have handled it differently, working with a very annoying New Kids on the Block?
Well, the difference is between me then, and that was like 1989. The difference is, and this is what I tell people all the time, back then, I was young, I was new, And you had to make everybody happy, and I wanted everybody to like me. So I was like a yes person, or I was never very firm about, I was just like, whatever you want. And they would like act like assholes. And I'd be like, okay, whatever you want, kind of thing. I wanted the managers to like me. I wanted the producers to like me. So I was like, I wanted people to like me, I was young, and you just wanted that acceptance. And I was running my business since I was 18 years old. So, but then nowadays, the difference is like, I don't care if you like me. So it's kind of changed my whole attitude about when I work with people. I just go in, I'm here to do the job. Let's get the job done and let's shoot. And if you don't like me, that's fine, but I'm going to get the best pictures you've ever had. And it's changed my attitude. I always say to everybody, I'm not looking for friends anymore because I have too many as it is. So it's kind of changed my attitude. And I always say, like, I have confidence now in my abilities, my skills, and my wisdom that I wish I had back then. Like, I really wish I had all this wisdom and experience back then, but you can't get experience until you kind of live. So that's what's kind of the big difference nowadays. I just have experience.
Were there any photographs from that New Kids on the Block shoot, or was it just like a complete wash?
No, there were. The problem with that shoot was that it wasn't so much like the shoot was good. They used it for tour programs and T-shirts and everything and posters. The problem with the shoot was that they were out of control, and they were just goofing off all the time. I couldn't get them to sit still. They were on top of the world at that time, and I was sitting there and I had just finished doing George Michael's Faith tour, and that's why they hired me, because I made George Michael this big thing, So they were just like, we want you to do this, but they were so out of control, and the managers couldn't control them. And so about two-thirds into the shoot, I think it was Donnie just started being a dick and started flipping me off in front of the camera, and not in that rock and roll I'm flipping off the camera way. And he just started getting annoying and obnoxious. And I just looked at eventually I just looked at the client, which was Winterland Productions. And I just said, I think we're done. And we literally had 2 more setups to go, but I just looked at myself, I think we're done. I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. And so we cut it short, and they were all like, yeah, we're done. And they just like ran out the door. Like, okay, cool. Thanks.
So you just mentioned that you shot George Michael's Faith tour. What was that like?
Well, for me, since his passing, it was the work, and George put me on the map. Not only did Faith, and the Faith photo is still around and is iconic, but George put me on the map. He was the nicest guy ever. I had the best time ever. I traveled to Australia with him and all over America. Did a million things with him. I'm actually working on a book now of all my photos because nobody's ever seen anything. So it was a great time. And, I always tell people, first time I ever did drugs was thanks to George, and, all these crazy things. And it was like I'd never traveled before that. So next thing I know, I'm going to all these places. So it was really exciting. It was a lot of fun. And he's the nicest guy ever, like ever. And to this day, that's the one thing I always think about. Like, he was just beyond nice to me. And so it was a lot of fun, a lot of fun. I was out there for every music video and, all the stuff. It was a lot of fun.
Wow. Now, you did a lot of photo shoots with bands in the whole Seattle grunge scene in the early 90s, like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, etc. Why do you think they chose you for their photos?
Well, they didn't. And that's what I tell people a lot. If you look at my website, cuffarohits.com, and you go through my 100 hits at this project I'm doing, and you see all these photos of all these people, a lot of those photos of all those people, that's not me getting hired, being chosen. That's me chasing people down and saying, hey, can I take your picture? And just doing it for free, doing it because I love it, doing it because I just knew, like, that's how I got Nirvana. I was up in Seattle shooting Queensryche for EMI Records and had an extra day off, and I just called the manager of Nirvana and said, hey, can I take pictures of Nirvana? And he said, I'll set it up, and he did. And he goes, we have a new drummer in the band, and it was Dave's first shoot. And so, like, I chased them down. I chased Pearl Jam down. I chased Soundgarden down. I was just chasing people. There's famous Seattle photographers that did it all up there, but I was the guy down in LA shooting it and kind of on the outside going in and shooting that Seattle scene and then coming back to LA and showing it and sharing it with everybody. So for me, it was just like, I just loved the music. My favorite band is Mudhoney, and I was like, they were the best. And so I did everything I could to get to them, and then Nirvana and everybody else. So it was a lot of fun. I had the best time ever up there.
So speaking
go
ahead, Samantha, go ahead.
You did a lot of photos of Soundgarden and Chris Cornell. With his recent passing, I mean, that must be really hard for you. And you must have just like gone back, I would think, and looked at all the photos that you did of him over the years. Like, how does that feel for you?
Well, that morning I woke up with a lot of texts from friends, just like the day that George passed away. And Chris's passing sucks. I know you guys don't know this, but he did write a song about one of my photos. So, you know, he was a very good friend back in the day, and he was super, super nice. And so, yes, I did hang out with them a lot in Seattle and LA when they come to LA, and I would shoot Chris. And but for me, you know, I actually wrote it about on my blog post about how there's two things that he did for me. Number one was he wrote a song about one of my photos. If you see this picture I have of Perry Farrell as Jesus Christ pose in a bed, that's what the song Jesus Christ Pose is about. If you read the lyrics, It's all about my picture.
Cool.
So there's a bit of music history. And Chris wrote it about that. And then my iconic pictures of Chris in the middle of the desert were shot at that Jesus Christ Pose video shoot. So that's like this whole connection there. And so I've written about a lot of this stuff on my websites, and I tell stories behind the photos on my websites and things like that. But the other cool thing that happened was, it was like, I think it was September, October of 91, and I was getting ready to direct my first music video with Pearl Jam, and I was up in Seattle, and Eddie plays this cassette tape of Chris Cornell's demos for singles. It was for this Pontier tape. If you've seen the movie, there's this Pontier cassette in the movie where, you know, Matt Dillon's character is Cliff Pontier, and he has this cassette of his songs. Well, Chris had taken these 5 song titles and turned them into songs, and then that's where the song Seasons came from. Well, Eddie played the tape for me, and I was like, this is the coolest tape ever. Can I get a copy? And he goes, oh, it's Chris's. I can't get you a copy. And so then I went and shot Soundgarden. I said, Chris, give me a copy. And Chris is like, no way. So like a week later, Eddie comes down, and the band comes down. I'm there to direct my first music video that I'm paying for and the whole thing. And Eddie walks up to me and gives me a hug and hands me the cassette and says, this is from Chris. And I was like, are you kidding me? And so that's one of my most prized possessions is this tape that Chris gave me and trusted me. And it was amazing. It was an amazing thing. Chris was always the nicest guy. Super, super
And
nice.
you still have the tape?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. One of my friends last week, who's a huge Soundgarden Pearl Jam fan, like came over here last week and was like freaking out, and he just looked at the tape and he's like, how much? I'll buy it off you. And I'm like going, get out of here.
Does it still work? When's the last time you put it in a cassette player?
25 years.
I wonder if it still
I did
works.
digitize the music though, and I have the MP3s of the songs.
Oh, that's good. You have a digital back.
You should put it like get it kind of like matted or something, like in like a shadow box or something.
Turn it into a paperweight. It's cool. I have some crazy mementos like that I always tell people about. I think it was around 95, 96. I threw everything away, kind of like I sold off my album collection. I got rid of all the guitars I had that were signed. I threw away all my platinum records. I just cleaned house, but I kept all this weird stuff that in working on my documentary, my producer and everybody laughs that I kept postcards that I got from Eddie Vedder. I kept notes. I kept all sorts of weird little personal items that I don't know why I kept them, but I'm glad I did. And so I have all this really great mementos of, you know, Eddie. I have the actual article that Eddie wrote the song Jeremy from, because that was my first video and stuff. And I have like all sorts of crazy things like that. So it's pretty cool. So
that you did direct the first music video for Jeremy. It was later dropped by the record label, but you said that you on your website in your frequently asked questions that you basically got the gig by paying for it yourself. I was just curious, like, how much did you actually spend for that production out of your pocket?
$25,000.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Basically what had happened, there's the whole story and timeline is on my website because I got tired of people writing the wrong things. There's all these Pearl Jam books out there that call, you know, this legend of this video or the myth of it. And I got really upset a while ago, and I was like, I'm going to spell the facts out. So I wrote it up on my website, cuffarophoto.com, to go here, you'll read the facts. But the short version of the story is I was up in Seattle. Eddie, his girlfriend Beth, and myself got drunk one night. We went to go see Soundgarden play, and I was telling Eddie about how the week previously I was shooting stills on a video set, and the director was an idiot, and it was embarrassing. And I'd been working on lots of music videos already, you know, as a still photographer with like great directors like David Fincher and Michael Bay and, you know, James Cameron and a million other directors. So I told Eddie, I can direct a music video. I was drunk, and I was like, I can do this. And so he's like, yeah, you can, Chris. You should do it. And then I sobered up the next day, and I said, I'm going to do it. Can I do you guys, and can I do Jeremy? And he's like, sure, let me ask the guys. And so he did, and they said yes. And it was nice enough of them to kind of believe in me. And then I had to raise the money, so I sold half my guitar collection off, borrowed the rest, and and then got the best producer, the best award-winning DP I could find, an amazing crew, and spent 2 days shooting the damn thing.
But then the label eventually dropped it, and they went for a different version of the video, right?
The story I was told to this day that I do believe was that ultimately what had happened was that when they first did it, they were like, we're not even going to release Jeremy, Chris. It's up, you can do whatever you want. And then like months after that, they were like, okay, so we are going to do Jeremy, but we're not going to use your video. And I said, I don't care. I did it for one reason. To this day, I did it for one reason and one reason only. It was just to show that I can do it. Like, that's all that mattered to me. I didn't care at the time. I didn't care if they were going to use it or not. Then I was told years and years later that they didn't use mine, and they used Mark Pellington's one that won Video of the Year and blew them up, was because there was a deal between MTV and Epic Records about, like, we'll make your video huge if you use our director and do this video. And so it was that kind of a thing.
A lot of politics.
To this day, more power to Mark. He's a great guy, and like I always tell people, I really don't care either way.
No, your video, though, is up on YouTube, so if people want to see the original video, they can just go look it up. So it's pretty cool. At least now it has a life in the internet.
6 million views.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
You must be rolling in the dough in that YouTube money.
Exactly.
Looking through your work, and a lot of it you have posted on Instagram, by the way. Everyone can go check out his Instagram account. I really think that you should. There's a lot of good work in here. I noticed that you return to black and white photography a lot. Why do you do that?
Okay. Okay, so I'll explain to you. I'll give you guys the short version of a long story. So 3 years ago, I realized I needed to do something big. As my friends who've known me, I've been shooting in Los Angeles, based out of Los Angeles for 37 years. My joke to everybody, and I say this really as a joke, that, everybody knows my photos. At least one of them, but they don't know it's me. So I need to change that. So 3 years ago, I was like, all right, I need to use something. So I created and started this project called Greatest Hits. And what it is, I took the best 100 photos, and I'm only doing black and white because I love black and white. And these best 100 photos are the 100 photos that are like what I call a greatest hits. Think of it as this is a music terminology, that this would be my box set with my best songs, So this is what this is. So that's why I'm heavily into black and white, is I'm trying to push greatest hits, get people to see that. We just had our first event in February at the iconic Tower Records on Sunset. Over 600 people showed up. I had live bands playing. I had amazing artists performing. Big Prince, gigantic Soundgarden, gigantic Chris Cornell, gigantic George Michael. Big Prince everywhere. Hugely successful. And now I'm working on Greatest Hits Sydney, Australia. Next year we're doing Italy, Tokyo, and if all goes well, South Africa. And then the last one I want to do is in New York City.
That's awesome.
It's kind of like
that's awesome.
So it's all this project is massive. But it's also all black and white. And everybody always asks me, why not color? Why not color? And I go, because we'll do Greatest Hits color in 3 years or 4 years.
Well, I love black and white, too. I think you can make even ugly people look good in black and white.
Thank you. That's what I say all the time. Like, my documentary's in black and white, and I keep saying that's my line for my documentary is, everybody looks good in black and white.
Have you ever had a subject, though, that was so horrendous you couldn't make look good, even with lighting and everything and even makeup?
Not really, no. I make everybody look good. I make everything look good. I really do. It's like, I sound dumb, but I always tell people I'm not confident, I'm not arrogant. It's what I do. Like, taking pictures and creating is like breathing for me. I don't even think about it. I just do it.
Do you think
like I said, 47 years is a long time.
Is every subject, I mean, everyone looks different, but are there certain rules you abide by? Like, in order to get a good shot of someone, you like to use a certain angle, or does it kind of depend on
my secrets?
Yeah, I do. Okay. I'm trying to know, where do you stand? Can you send us a plot?
I do these a lot in lectures and stuff. So here's my secrets. Number one, when you're shooting pictures of people, most people, maybe not so much in younger generations, but most people hate having their picture taken. So my number one trick is I get people to talk about, I distract them. And for the last 40 years, everybody I shoot, I always ask them, I get them to think about other things. I'll say, like, what's your first concert? What's your first CD? And we get this whole first concert stories going because everybody has one. So I get people to think about something else besides what they're doing. That's the number one thing I do. Second thing I always do is I always tell people, I like shooting a rock star or an actor or an actress is no different than shooting a 2-year-old. It's the same thing. When you shoot a 2-year-old, you're going, look at the birdie, smile, big cheese.
Right.
Same thing with an actor. You kind of just perform in front of them to get them to do what you want. So I have my what I call my shoot shtick that I've used for years and developed, and I can get through any situation, through any type of subject. But one thing you do is you distract them. You don't get them to think about taking pictures. And I have, get them to put their mind elsewhere and get them to relax. That's the thing with me. I just want everybody to relax.
Who taught you that technique? Is that something you developed over time, or did somebody else teach you that?
No, it started out when I was young. When I was in high school, I used to shoot for modeling schools. So I would learn just to talk to strange people. I would, next thing you know, I'm 18 and some 16-year-old girl walks into the studio and you're like, hey, hi, and you're just like nervous. So I learned just to learn to deal with strange people. I've been in rooms and shot some of the most famous, biggest people, but I always tell myself like, they're just people, and I think they like it better when I treat them like people. I'm from Northern California, and I grew up with the 11th commandment, which is thou shalt hate SoCal. So one day I had to shoot Kobe Bryant, who I hate. And like in front of I talked shit to him the whole day and basically challenged him a one-on-one basketball game, and he wouldn't do it. And then everybody's like, I can't believe, my assistants were freaking out. Like, I can't believe you're doing that. It's Kobe Bryant. I was like, I don't care. And he loved it. And they called me up a day later, asked me if I would shoot something for him. And I was like, sure.
That's hilarious.
So I knew I was okay with it. So it's all about just treating people nice and I always tell people, I just treat people the way I want to be treated. It's that simple.
Well, I've also noticed a lot of your shots are kind of candid. Like on your website, there's a set you did of Gwen Stefani back in the 90s. I think it's during the Tragic Kingdom era. And it's really cool because it's just like her like putting on her lipstick and like laying in bed, and it just seems so natural. Is that something that you like to do?
There's a big story behind that shoot, though.
What is it?
It's a personal story in that basically I saw her a month prior because I'd shot No Doubt a bunch of times, and I did their first album cover and stuff, and I always liked Gwen. We always got along, and I ran into her at a Bush video shoot. She came to see Gavin, and we were sitting there talking, in between things, and she's asking me how life is, and I said to her it was horrible. I said, my girlfriend left me. My heart's broken. I have no reason to live. I was telling this so sad story, and I said, I don't care about taking pictures anymore. And she's like, oh, my God, Chris, that's terrible. She goes, well, I got some free time. We're not doing anything. I said, what do you mean? She goes, let's do a photo shoot. And I said, okay. So we put the shoot together, shot it at some crack hotel on Sunset Boulevard. And I got a makeup artist. It was Gwen, a makeup artist, and a hairstylist. And we just hung out for the day, shooting inside this crack hotel. Literally deals going on while her Jaguar's parked in the back.
Oh, my God.
And we just hung out and just took pictures. And Gwen, being Gwen, just was like, this is amazing. We had a great time. She gave me a big fat hug at the end. I ended up showing her the pictures like a week later. And I just said to her, I'm never going to release them. And she's like, okay. And I go, it's for us. And I didn't release them until maybe like 2-3 years ago. I sat on them for a long, long time. Because it was very personal. And she's that kind of person to this day. I mean, I always say if I ran into her today, I'm sure we'd have a good laugh about stuff. But she's just a simple girl and a lot of fun.
Wow, that's a cool story.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But I love those pictures because it shows a different side of her. I mean, you're saying that you had a makeup artist there, but as somebody just viewing them, it just kind of seems like you're seeing like a glimpse into Gwen in her kind of like a natural state. So they're very cool.
Well, is, and that's what I'm saying. Like, it was just, those are my favorite kind of shoots, honestly. Like, when I shoot, these days I shoot a lot of one-on-one stuff with friends and stuff, and it's like, I don't like all the, I've done shoots with 5 assistants and hair and makeup and crews and people and sets. And my favorite thing is like just one-on-one with a girl or a friend. And you just shoot. Like my joke always is I don't need all that stuff to get a great photo. If you look at my photos, examples are like Nirvana on the dumpster. That's just me going, hey, let's go. There's an alley across the street. Let's go. Hey, guys, stand here and sit there. Or picture of Ben Harper where it's like, hey, Ben, there's some light coming from this window in a hallway. Stand here. Like, I don't like big crazy things because I'm all about capturing who the person is. And, Iggy Pop, was just against the wall at the Chateau Marmont. It's like, it's just keep it simple. It's what I've always done.
Do you attribute your success more to the subjects you're working with or your technique?
I say 50-50. The subjects, as I always tell people, I'm as only good as what's in front of me. I always say, if you're boring, then I'm going to get boring pictures. If you're crazy, I'm going to get crazy pictures. And so with and then now the technique, I don't even think about what I always tell people, I don't think when I shoot. It's like I just don't. It's natural for me. I don't even, like I always tell people, it's like, when they ask Michael Jordan, you're going to dunk the ball. Do you think about what you're going to move the ball to left or right? No, he just does it, and you don't think about it. So, but I do say subjects are important. That's why I've always searched for great subjects. I always tell people I would love to lock myself in a room with, Lady Gaga for a week and have some fun. I know I can come up with some great shit with her.
I don't see why she wouldn't have that happen. Let's make it happen now. Lady Gaga, are you listening?
Yeah. Gaga, if you're out there, Chris Cuffaro wants to shoot with you.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
But you used to also go on tour with a lot of bands. What was that like? Did you like doing that, or do you prefer doing like the actual just like shooting? Because concert photography is a lot different in a way, because you have to get the aperture just right. Because when people are in motion, it's really hard to get, especially on film. I would think. I just know with digital, even it's hard to get a non-blurred shot of it. So like,
right. Well, the back in the day, I loved it. I mean, I started shooting concerts when I was 16 years old. Like I would take my camera to go see Earth, Wind & Fire or the Commodores or Rufus and Chaka Khan, and I would take pictures always, but I was in the seats. But then my first actual official being paid to shoot live photos was the Faith Tour. So I had all this access, and it was amazing, and I was traveling all over the place, and I loved it. I thought that's how every tour was done. And then I got back into LA, and then I realized that's not all tours are on private jets. And then next thing you know, I'm on a tour bus. This sucks. I'm on a van. This really sucks. And so I was just like, I love shooting shows. I just shot Rob Thomas 6 months ago at his show, or more than 6 months ago, 8 months ago. First show I shot in like 14 years, and it was a lot of fun. But I liked it.
You're shooting a lot of big bands, but just for fun, do you ever put in a press request under a different name for like a small band to go to a little venue?
No, what I did, here's the thing funny, the last 3 years, basically, because nobody has any money. Nobody wants to spend any money. I mean, it's a joke now. Being a photographer, it sucks, basically. I don't care what anybody says. The money's not like it once was. 25 years ago, I got paid real money. Now nobody has any. Like, I just directed a music video 2 weeks ago for first one in 20 years, and the whole budget was $2,000. So,
whoa.
What band was it?
The last one I did. Well, I'll tell you what I was going to say is the last one I did 20 years ago was the budget was $106,000 to give you the difference. But then I did Josh Todd and The Conflict, his new band. It's amazing. The video's great. Comes out, I think, in a week.
Oh, cool. Well, if you want to premiere that on idobi, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah.
I'll let you know. Definitely. I'll pass you on the link.
Cool.
But the money's not there. So what I've been doing the last 2-3 years is I tell any artist, basically, if you treat me nice, you bring me some donuts, I'll shoot you for free. And so I've been shooting all these new artists, new rappers, new singers, pop singers, bands, whatever. Because why try making money if they don't have it anyways? And even guys will say, "We'll give you $200," and then they show up with like $123 and go, "Hey, we'll get the rest to you next week." And I go, "Don't even bother." I'd rather help people. And as I always say, I've lived my dream 100 times over. So my goal now is to help people live their dreams.
There's no money in music, but there's still money in shooting like Vince Vaughn for Entertainment Weekly, right?
No money in that either.
Oh, really?
There's no. Yeah, I mean, I don't shoot that often anymore. I'm working on other things. I'm working on directing. I'm working on my greatest hits project. Has been everything, literally 24/7 for 3 years. It took me 3 years to get to that one night, and now I have 3 more years to finish all these other shows. So that takes up all my time. And so, selling prints has been, is part of my revenue and things like that. Luckily people want to buy pictures of Chris Cornell and George Michael and things like that.
And
your prints are amazing. I was really bummed back when you had the auction in February that you couldn't, I think you had to be there in person, because I was trying to find a thing to buy it offline because there were so many amazing portraits that were up for sale. Like I wanted to buy something. So, I mean, yeah, definitely. I can totally see where there's probably more money.
There's a store on my website,
prints.
and I'm building on that even more so every day. I have a gallery in Los Angeles that reps me. We're working on them. I tell people all the time that what I'm doing now is great, but honestly, what I'm working on is even bigger and better. I mean, I have this crazy. I keep saying to everybody, this first event, some of my friends thought it was like the you know, it was the pinnacle of my career to have this big night at, you know, Tower Records on Sunset and everything. And I was like, no, this is just the first paragraph of the next chapter of my life. I mean, I have big plans for the next, you know, 20, 30 years if I'm lucky. And, you know, I've always been the kind of person whose, you know, motto is go big or go home. Is kind of been my thing with life in general. So, you know, or like, you know, I'm going to shoot till I drop. I mean, that's just my plan.
Well, where do you see yourself in the next 20 or 30 years? Like, what have you accomplished? If you're looking at your life and doing another retrospective, what have you accomplished?
Well, a lot of it, what my goals are right now are simple. I want to have a lot of exhibitions because one thing you guys will agree with me, everybody loves music. And yes. Everybody has a music story. You guys have your first concert stories or your first records or the best concerts. And that's what I try to spread with Greatest Hits is this love and passion I have for music. And that's why I did what I did was because of music. I always tell people it wasn't for the money. I was stupid. I was just like dumb. I was like, I want to go have fun. I want to go take pictures of Jane's Addiction and, you know, be there. So I want to keep spreading that for the next 20, 30 years. And in the middle of all that, you know, I'm trying to direct more. I'm working on a documentary, trying to pitch another one. And then I also want to, like, I keep saying to everybody, if anything, I want to keep doing what I've been doing, which is having fun. I've had more fun than anybody I know. Again, and I can prove it with pictures. I mean, my life has been sex, drugs, and rock and roll since I was 10.
Now, if you had to pick, I'm not going to have you pick like one band because I know that's going to be really hard. But if you had to pick like 5 artists or subjects that you've shot over your whole career, who would be your top 5 favorite people or artists or band that you've shot?
Well, I haven't shot you yet, so I'll leave that spot open.
There you go. Make that happen.
But no, I'd say my list is Iggy Pop's number 1, Michael Hutchins number 2. I'd probably say because of the shoots and the sessions, I loved my session with Fiona Apple is epic. It was her second photo shoot ever. Jane's Addiction, of course, because I documented them for 2 years and anything and everything I could do with them, I would, because they were just gods to me. And then I'd say the last one, probably just because of the experiences I had with them and the fun, would be George Michael, because it was just fun. It was like a traveling party, basically, and it was just a lot of fun. And I grew up a lot during that year, a lot. So it was really important for me.
Wow.
Well, everyone, go ahead.
Oh, now as far as like new artists, who do you see as being the next big thing? Like I saw on your website, you've shot Hey Violet, who they're coming up. I think they were just on the cover of Kerrang recently. So like, who would you say is going to be like the next big band that like 20 years from now we'll be looking back on the way that we're looking back on like Soundgarden or Nirvana?
I love that band. I love the girls. I love how talented they are. I love everything about that band. And I helped them I helped them there along the way, and they helped me, and they're great. I mean, I think everything they put out is good. If you listen to it, it's just good, you know. My favorite band that's out of Australia, so my favorite rock band, they're called Lepers and Crooks. I mean, these guys are the real deal, and they're amazing. They're talented, great songwriters. They have guitar solos, and the lead singer is a fucking god. Then there's a band. Then I'd say I just actually wrote a blog post about this, about my new wish list of all these new bands. There's this rapper I love called Jadina, I think it goes by. He's amazing. But I hope there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of new really good acts out there, but they're just harder to find now than everything because you got to kind of dig through the bushes to get to that one good one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Now, another question I want to ask, because like you were there in like the golden age of like alternative rock, and now, you know, everyone knows the music industry is like dead, and it's because of digital downloads. And the same thing kind of goes for photography, because, you know, back when you were shooting in the 90s, you were shooting and the 80s, you were shooting on film, and film took a skill, and it was really hard to do. It was something you had to master. You couldn't just be like Joe Blow, go buy a camera and shoot what you shot. But now we have all of these digital DSLR cameras that are pretty easy for the layman to figure out. So kind of like anybody can pick up a camera now. Do you feel that the digital age has kind of destroyed photography or cheapened it, much in the same way that it's cheapened the music industry?
Very much so. I mean, it's had a huge impact. Like I say, it's like I always say back in my day, like really my day hasn't finished yet. But back in the day, different photographers, there's great photographers. Let's just talk the music world. There was great photographers like Michael Levine, Frank Ockenfels, myself, Charles Peterson. These guys who we all had our thing. We all used different types of cameras and different types of films, and we did different types of processes. I had 4 different types of cameras I would use and do different types of processes, whether it's black and white or color. You had to be creative there. Nowadays, everybody it was like back then it was like 50% what you shot and then 50% what you did in post-production. Well, now it's like 10% what you shoot, which I always say you're just gathering information nowadays. And it's 90% what you do with that information in post-production in Photoshop. Now, I love digital. I haven't shot film in 15 years. I have no plans to ever shoot film. And I love digital. But I'm glad I got to experience both worlds in a sense. But yes, now everybody has a Canon 5D. Everybody's at a concert with their phones taking pictures. That's why people ask me why I don't shoot concerts. I go, why would I? Everybody else is shooting it. Back when I was shooting it, there was me and nobody else, So nowadays, it's just everybody's got the same camera. And if you look at photos, a lot of photos, they all look like the same thing. Nobody stands out. I mean, really, Definitely. They don't. They just all look the same. And I always say, like, that's where I'm proud of my photos are iconic, and they stand out above everybody else's because they're iconic and they're also the way I shoot. So, it took me years to get to that. When I was 10 years old, my photographer told me, you haven't done shit. He goes, you haven't done shit until you create photos that'll last a lifetime. And I went, done that, got that checked off on my list.
Now, even though you hate shooting concerts, like back in the day, like you said, you went on tour with Jane's Addiction, you went on tour with George Michael's. If somebody were to call you up right now and be like, Chris, we're going to take you on tour with us, we want you to document the whole thing, would you do that? Or is that just something you have no interest in because of iPhones, or you just don't feel like touring?
Well, as Hey Violet did ask me to shoot some shows for them at one point. And I have friends in LA that wanted me to shoot their shows, and I ask them the same question. What time do you guys go on? And they go, why? I go, what time do you go on? They go, like 11. I go, dude, I'm in bed by 9 and I'm asleep by 9:30. Sorry. It's past my bedtime these days. I go to bed early. I get up at 5 a.m. every day and work. So I always tell people I did all that stuff, and it's like, I don't want to do it again. And I did it great, and I did it with the best. So why would I try to do that? I mean, I can't say no, because if the right person did call, like a Lady Gaga, and said, we'll pay you a bucket load of money, come have fun, I'd be like, okay. I said, give me an 8-ball. I'd go, get me an 8-ball and let's go.
Now, we have to ask everybody that comes on our show that's not a paranormal expert, have you ever had a paranormal experience?
Yes, I have. You want to hear my ghost story? And it's a true story, and I have a witness.
And no photos,
ready?
Though, ironically.
This one, well, I have photos of the space and the place, but not of what happened. So let's go back to 1988. We're going time machine. 1988, I'm down in Australia.
Before I was born.
Shooting George Michael's. We're shooting the video for One More Try, okay? In this old hotel from like 1800s outside of Sydney, Australia in the Blue Mountains. This hotel's like, they tell us it's haunted, it's old, it's creepy. There's doors that are locked that haven't been opened in centuries, and all this. They're just telling us this, and they're trying to scare us, but at the same time, we're like, whatever, and we'll believe you, whatever. So my best friend at the time, who's the makeup artist, we just said at one point we're bored, it's like, hey, let's explore this hotel. So we're walking around this hotel, looking in these, everything was musty and dusty and crazy. So we opened this one door in this room, and it's filled with all this old beat-up furniture. Like, I'm talking old, like really old. And it's covered in sheets and stuff and craziness. And then we see another door inside this room. So we go, let's go through that door. So we go out of the hallway into the room, and then out of the other door into the other room. And we open that door, and there's a stairwell. And we're like, oh, this is really creepy. Where does the stair goes? And so we start going down the stairs. Then we hear this crazy noise, like coming from down there, and we're like, okay, that's too creepy. And we look at each other like, let's get the hell out of here. So we run out the door. We run out both doors, and we run down the hall, and everybody's laughing. George is laughing at us. What's wrong? Oh, it's creepy, it's scary, and we're telling them what happened. We go back they're like, well, show us. We go back to the room, and we go back down the hallway back to them, and the front door of this hallway was closed. We didn't close it. And the door in the other that was into the stairwell was closed too, and we didn't close it. And so to this day, I saw her like months ago. We were talking about this. To this day, we still think somebody spooky, close the doors.
Ooh.
It's really
creepy.
So we were like, oh my God, that's spooky.
And your ghost story involves George Michael, so you kind of win having like one of the coolest ghost stories we've heard on this show.
And that also brings everything full circle as well. CuffaroPhoto.com. That's the website. Blog on there as well. And it's a shame you don't have more Instagram followers because you invented Instagram as far as I'm concerned. So everyone follow Cuffaro Photo on Instagram as well.
Please. I'm trying to get followers. I tell people all the time, like, I should have 1 million followers. I have the best feed.
You should. You have like the coolest photos of everybody.
And they're all original. I think what the problem is, you go to your Instagram, it all looks like stock photos. They're so good.
Because they're all
like I've seen all these before.
Super famous people.
Yeah, and they don't realize that they don't realize I'm the guy that's doing it.
Right.
You know, like
exactly.
They go like, oh, I've seen that picture. Like, no, it's funny. I love Instagram. It's like one of my favorite things. But I have friends all the time say to me, all you need to do is shoot Kim Kardashian. I'm like, yeah, I know. That's all I need to do. But like back in January, I shot my good friend Dita Von Teese for the first time in years. We've been friends for years and shot 1 million times. In one day, I shot her in one day and I gained like 500 followers. And in one day, I was like, Dita, we need to do more shoots. Let's keep going.
Yeah, no,
I gain followers when people die.
Yeah, you've had like really cool people that aren't even in music, but are kind of like associated with music that you've shot, like Dita, and then you shot Kat Von D for her book, High Voltage Tattoo, which those are some really cool photos.
I shot a lot of people. Like I said, I shot everybody from Brad Pitt. I shot Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson's wedding back in '88. How's that one?
Wow, before drones.
Wow. So are you saying that we could have you as a wedding photographer if somebody was getting married, they could hire you as a wedding photographer?
Well, after I did Tom and Rita's, I said I'd never do a wedding again because it wouldn't get better than that. And it wasn't till about, I think around 2000 that I actually did snapshot at a friend's wedding who got married in Italy. But otherwise than that, I always tell people, like, you can't beat Tom and Rita. They're cool people.
But you're available for high school senior photos, right?
Yes, very much so. Facebook photos, whatever you need. I can be bought. I'm easy. I'm so easy, it's ridiculous.
Oh, that's too funny. Well, let us know when your documentary comes out or when you have something else going on, because we'd love to have you back, because I'm sure that you have a ton of stories that we didn't even get to hit on today.
You have no idea.
Okay, so we're going to have you back to spill some tea.
Let me do one shameless plug.
Please do.
So if you go to my website, cuffarohits.com, or really it's the place to go. There's stories, there's videos, there's so much going on. And then on my regular website, Cuffaro Photo, is where I tell stories, anniversary stories of photo shoots. And I mean, I just have been spelling it all out. The reason is because I tell people all the time, like, I'm more than just a photographer. Taking pictures is 10% of my life, and I've had this great life, and I've loved every bit of it, and I want to share it to everybody. So when people talk to me about Pearl Jams and the Nirvanas, I have no problems, but I go, there's so much more than that. And I just tell people all the time, like, you'll find it entertaining and it's information, and that's just like I tell people, I'm all about having fun. I've been that way since I was 10 years old when I started. Since I would tell people the stories that when I was 12, 13 years old, I just said to everybody, like, when I die, I want the Met in New York to have a retrospective on my career. And I want you to walk through this work of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and then just go, like, this fucker had fun while he was here. That's all I want people to think, because I have. So it's kind of where I'm at.
Well, I'm already jealous of your life as it is, and you're not nearly anywhere near the finish line. So
yeah.
It's
been awesome talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We hope this wasn't another typical boring interview, and you got something out of it, and you're able to have fun with it.
I'm always having fun. Like I said, my rule is if I'm not having fun, I ain't showing up.
Okay, cool. All right, well, you
awesome.
Remember that, Samantha, when we shoot too.
Okay, I will.
Have fun. You'll be there by yourself. Trust me.
There you go. All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Blackout returns on idobi Radio.
Okay, welcome back to Blackout. Our next guest is Dr. Michael Salla, and he is a former university professor in international relations and is the author of Insiders Reveal Secret Space Programs and Extraterrestrial Alliances. And that actually has over 200 reader reviews, by the way, if you want to check those out. And he is the author-editor of 9 other books dealing with exopolitics, international conflict, U.S. foreign policy, and global peace. And his newest book is the U.S. Navy's Secret Space Program and Nordic Extraterrestrial Alliance. Welcome to the show, Dr. Salla.
Thanks for having me.
You're telling us that the U.S. Navy has a secret space program, huh?
Well, that's right, yes. They have been involved in this since the Second World War, when they had a bunch of spies over in Nazi Germany, and that they were able to use that information to develop their own secret space program.
And they got this technology from Nazi Germany.
That's right, yes. They had 29 spies embedded through Germany's leading aerospace companies, and they were experimenting with a lot of different types of propulsion systems, but some of these involved anti-gravity, rotating plasma energy, and this was used to develop what we today would consider to be flying saucers. But this was these were ships that the Nazis were developing both during and even before the Second World War, and the Navy were spying on the Germans doing this.
How did this technology come to be in the hands of Nazi Germany?
There had been scientific research done on the anti-gravity effect of high-voltage electrostatics. Thomas Townsend Brown had the first patent, that was 1927, that was in Britain. And so there was an understanding that being able to generate high-voltage electrostatics did create some kind of unusual principle that could be used for propulsion. And the same thing was found when plasma, high-energy plasma, was rotated in a circular motion, that also that kind of effect was observed. And so there was a lot of research done, especially in Germany, because the Germans, they went around the world hunting esoteric texts and sources and found a lot of information, especially from India, the ancient Vedic culture there. There were a number of texts talking about these flying vimanas, flying saucers that ancient India had developed, and they described various ways in which these vehicles could be built using high-energy rotating plasma based on mercury.
Now, these this Nazi technology, is this relating to the Nazi bell, also known as Die Glocke?
That's part of it, yes. That was part of the research. But the Germans were very prolific in having quite a number of research projects. But the Nazi bell, where you actually had this torsion energy field, again, rotating plasma very quickly in a circular path, and experimenting with high energy, with high voltage electrostatics. This was part of their way of developing propulsion systems for these flying saucers they were working on.
You know, here in America, we like to say that we're the best at everything we do. We are number one in science and research. How is it that at the time we missed all of this, supposed technology that the Nazis were finding?
The German scientific community was really outstanding. They had the world's leading thinkers in a number of kind of theoretical physics disciplines. There were a number of projects that these theoretical physicists were helping work on that had a practical application. And some of it was to do with developing these kinds of exotic propulsion devices that were used for these new aerospace platforms. And this was something that the U.S. military discovered after the Second World War, or at least as far as Project Paperclip was concerned, that the official files that were released under Project Paperclip was that German scientific genius was something that was necessary for the U.S. to catch up to the advances that the Nazis had achieved during the Second World War.
You mentioned before plasma balls and plasma rotation with the Nazi engineering. Is that what we think of as the Foo Fighters, in World War II, when the pilots would see these lights in the sky that they couldn't really identify where they came from?
Well, yes, that's one of the things that the Germans were working on, is being able to deploy some kind of electrostatic force in the upper atmosphere and direct it in a way that could be used against enemy airplanes. So the Germans were working on those kinds of technologies. Now, whether or not that was, what the Foo Fighters, what the Allied pilots saw, whether these were all German technologies, or whether there was some kind of extraterrestrial kind of probe there, that's not quite clear. But certainly we do know that the Germans did work on these technologies, and the Allied forces at the time actually had, the newspapers actually did describe them as some kind of exotic new German weapon.
If the Germans had all this advanced technology, why, in your opinion, do you think they weren't able to win the war?
Well, they basically didn't really appreciate the kind of ability of both the U.S. military-industrial complex and the Soviet military-industrial complex to be able to produce large numbers of airplanes and tanks. The Soviets created a large number of tanks that were able to defeat the Germans. So even though the Germans were working on these really exotic kind of systems, aerospace, anti-gravity, torsion field physics, all of these exotic weapon systems, when it came to bombers and tanks, the Americans and the Russians simply outperformed them. That's where all of the industrial resources of the US and the Soviets were concentrated. And, the Battle of Stalingrad, that was the big defeat. That's when Nazi Germany experienced its very first defeat. And from then on, it was just a continuation of military defeats on the battlefield against the Soviets, who just overwhelmed the Germans with the number of tanks and personnel that they were able to kind of throw at them at the front. And then, of course, in 1942, you had the Americans come on the scene, and they brought in huge numbers of fighters and bombers to start bombing Nazi Germany and occupied Europe.
Now, I noticed on your website you mentioned the Battle of Los Angeles, also known as the Los Angeles Air Raid, which occurred in February of 1942 when the air raid sirens all went off over Los Angeles. There was an object in the sky. They fired hundreds of rounds of artillery. People on the ground were killed. And then the government came back and said, oh, it was just a weather balloon. Though the pictures that have come out about it, it's clearly not a weather balloon in the photograph. If it had been a weather balloon, the weather balloon would have been easily shot down by the U.S. government, and we wouldn't have these photos of some object that all the search beams are converging on in the sky. Do you believe that the object in the Battle of Los Angeles was a Nazi craft?
In that case, I think it was some kind of extraterrestrial craft. In 1942, the Nazis didn't have the kind of craft that could just hover over Los Angeles for several hours and withstand, thousands of artillery shells. If they had that kind of weapon, they would have used it during the war itself. So this was clearly not, I believe, a Nazi craft. I think it was an extraterrestrial craft. And according to leaked documents, two of these were recovered immediately after the Los Angeles air raid, and they were sent off to Wright Field, which was the Army Air Force's premier research facility, to really understand the technology behind these craft. And a study group was set up involving the U.S. Army Air Force, the U.S. Navy, and the Douglas Aircraft Company. And that informal study group that was created to study these retrieved extraterrestrial flying saucer craft, that study group eventually in October of 1945 became Project RAND, and it's one of its primary responsibilities was to understand how to respond to extraterrestrial visitation.
Were there any living occupants or occupants in general found on these recovered crafts?
No. As far as I know, the craft that were recovered were pilotless drones. So these were things that the extraterrestrials were kind of using to just observe, and apparently they had been shot down by the artillery shells.
Now, do you think that this is similar to what happened in Roswell, or in Roswell were there in fact occupants?
In the Roswell case, we know that there were occupants because this is something that multiple whistleblowers have talked about, that they saw the bodies, that there were autopsies that were conducted on the bodies, and that the bodies were shipped from Roswell off to, again, Wright Field for study.
Now, going back to the Nazis, were the Nazis personally in contact with alien life forms?
Well, that's something that I think actually really did happen, which for a lot of people is going to be quite a surprise. But this is based on what William Tompkins, who's one of the primary witnesses that I use in that book, because he was working as an aircraft research and information disseminator for the Navy. He was part of a espionage program where they had 29 spies in Germany, and he was disseminating that information to various companies and think tanks in the US. And he was saying that what the spies had learned in Germany was that the Nazis had reached an agreement with a particular group of extraterrestrials that were humanoid but had reptilian features, and that these reptilian humanoids were basically assisting the Nazis by giving them advice on how to reverse engineer flying saucer technologies.
I've heard some theories, about how these reptilian creatures came from, the even parts of our own world, the center of the Earth. Or are you saying that they
Hollow Earth? Yeah,
or are they that type of reptoid, or are they more of a extraterrestrial?
Yes, the ones that Hitler had reached an agreement with were more extraterrestrial. That these were ones that had come from another star system. The one that's mentioned most is Alpha Draconis, and that they basically were trying to help the Nazis win the war. And that there was another group of extraterrestrials that were doing the same thing, but covertly, with the Allied powers. So in a way, the Second World War was a kind of proxy war between opposing extraterrestrial groups that had chosen their respective kind of protagonists in this human conflict.
They're humanoid, but they have reptilian features. What are some of these reptilian features?
Well, the most prominent would be the skin. The skin is kind of green, scaly. Their teeth structure is more like that kind of crocodile structure. The eyes would have these kind of vertical slits rather than a circular, rather than having a circular pupil like we do. They have a kind of a vertical pupil that's kind of more an ellipse. They have kind of talons, rather than kind of nails. They have these huge talons that can be used for kind of ripping. So they're considered to be a predatory species that are very powerful warriors.
And they spoke German.
Not that they spoke German. They reached agreements with the Germans. I don't know how they communicated with them. It may have just been a kind of telepathic type of communication. That I'm not certain of. But certainly, there had been agreements reached using some means of communication, probably some telepathic means, which I believe is very common with extraterrestrials.
Now, what was the reptilians' motivation for helping the Germans? Because, as far as I remember from history, the whole World War II pretty much started when the Germans were trying to eradicate the Jews. I mean, why would reptilian aliens care about killing off 7 million Jews?
I don't think that they were really interested in that kind of Nazi policy. I think what they were interested in was recruiting a mercenary force that could be used for this kind of intergalactic conflict that the reptilians wanted, because I guess from their perspective, Earth was a kind of very warlike race. It was a planet with many different nation states, with large populations that had a kind of warrior tradition between them, and that it would make for an excellent recruiting ground for mercenaries who could be trained or could be kind of genetically enhanced, that could join in this intergalactic conflict that the reptilians were involved in with other races.
Were some of these other races involved with the U.S. government?
Exactly, yes. Some of these other races are more human-looking. They are really, in some ways, indistinguishable from, say, Northern Europeans.
Are you referring to the Nordic aliens that are described as looking like, basically like, like tall Swedish-looking people with blonde hair?
Exactly, yes. That not that all human-looking extraterrestrials are described in that way, but the ones that I know began working with the U.S. Navy, they were very, very similar to Northern European or Nordic-looking humans, and they are largely opposed to the way in which the draconian reptilian species operates.
It's kind of ironic when you think about it, because Hitler wanted to get rid of everyone who wasn't blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and then he was supposedly being helped by reptilians, and the people that were, or not people, the ETs that were blonde-haired and blue eyes were actually against Hitler. So that's kind of interesting.
Ironic.
Yeah, very ironic.
But it did actually begin that way with Hitler, because Germany in the 1920s, during the Weimar Republic, that was the first time that these Nordic-looking extraterrestrials began helping with the development of these kinds of advanced spacecraft technologies. And so there were a lot of civilian groups in the Weimar Republic that began working with these Nordic extraterrestrials. But then what happened was that the Nazis came to power in 1933 and basically co-opted everything. And so the Nordics decided that the Nazi Germany was no longer going to be a suitable partner, and began working with the Allies.
Do we have evidence? Go ahead. I have kind of a sidebar question. Go ahead.
Well, I was about to ask. So the Nordic aliens, they're completely benevolent and peaceable?
Not necessarily. The ones that were helping the Allied powers during the war, they are kind of more interventionist. They certainly are prepared to kind of wage military hostilities. That this is kind of a feature of a galactic-wide conflict between them. But on Earth, their intervention was basically covert, where they were just really assisting the Allied powers in developing advanced technologies or developing defensive technologies to combat whatever it was that the Nazis were putting out into the military arena with through their cooperation with the reptilians.
From a military strategic standpoint, do you think that these Nordic extraterrestrials would want to crossbreed with the human race?
I think they have. I think this is part of our history. If you look at the historical texts, many of them talk about the gods kind of interbreeding with humanity. I think when they refer to the gods, really what they're describing are extraterrestrials. So, you look at, say, the Greek legends where you have Zeus impregnating women and Apollo doing the same thing, and you have heroes being born, whether it's Hercules or Jason or whatever hero. Typically they have a human mother and a kind of god as a father.
Even with Alexander the Great, they said that his father was Zeus. Like, there was this rumor that his mother had slept with the god, and he was really the son of the god and not the king.
Exactly, yes. Actually, this was very common in the ancient world. People who rose to prominent positions or were great conquerors or achieved exemplary things, they were often seen to be people who had, the god gene or had some kind of interaction or interbreeding with the gods. And, this was very common in the ancient world because I think that's when extraterrestrials openly interacted with humanity. But, of course, they were considered to be gods and that their flying ships or their flying saucers were described as, flying chariots and so forth.
Is that why we have the notion that when it comes to royal bloodlines that these titles were bestowed upon them by God? And is that also why there's the rumors that I personally find to be kind of crazy that like the Queen of England is part reptilian?
I think there's a lot of truth to that in terms of the divine right of kings, if we look at that historical concept, how that evolved, that goes way back into human antiquity when a king had the right to rule by virtue of their bloodline connection with the gods. So you were seen to be a ruler by virtue of you being a son or grandson or somehow a direct descendant of Zeus or Odin or Indra or whatever god from whatever culture. That is the basis for the divine right of kings, and it was only in the 17th century that you actually had a movement that began in England to overthrow that concept and come up with the idea of a constitutional monarchy where sovereignty wasn't with the king but was with the people.
So you think that these ancient Greek gods are indeed actually the same Nordic extraterrestrials that our U.S. government is dealing with today, the same race? Is that what you're saying?
Definitely. Yes, if you look at the ancient legends, especially in Vedic culture, like the Mahabharata, the way in which that describes this great conflict over ancient India, it describes the different gods, how they were on different sides. The human-looking gods, they were on the good side, and the demonic gods, they were on the other side, and it actually described a reptilian-looking group of beings. They were called the Nagas. That were actually part of the Mahabharata. That were part of the war, and the Nagas, this this earth-based reptilian group, which are different to the kind of off-world or draconian reptilians. So even amongst the reptilians, you have opposing groups, some more positive than others.
On the cover of one of your other books, Insiders Reveal Secret Space Programs and Extraterrestrial Alliances, you show another type of alien, which I believe is called the blue avian. Where do they come from, and can you tell us about them?
Sure. They're a group that have recently re-emerged. This is based on the eyewitness testimony of Corey Good, who's a secret space program whistleblower. He says he worked for 20 years in a U.S. Navy-run program, and he says that in 2013 he began meeting with these 8-foot-tall, blue-skinned, avian-looking extraterrestrials, and that they began feeding him a lot of information about what's happening in the world today, and made him their delegate in meetings with between different secret space program groups and different extraterrestrial alliances. So he was chosen to play this role, and has subsequently learned that the blue avians actually appear in historical texts, that you do have references, especially in ancient Egypt, to this kind of blue-skinned, bird-like looking group of gods.
Now, what's their agenda?
Their agenda apparently is one to kind of level the playing field, or to almost kind of come in as a galactic umpire, that on the one hand you have this Nordic-looking group of extraterrestrials, on the other you have this reptilian group, and that they are involved in this kind of galactic-wide conflict, which is now involved in our human affairs, or that's been brought to the earth, dating from the Second World War or even earlier, and that the blue avians have come in to try and kind of make sure that no one group has dominance, so that both sides can negotiate and come up with some resolution so that the truth can be revealed to the rest of the planet.
Why do you think that all of these ET races that are working with our government think that it's within the best interest to keep the general population at large in the dark?
I think it began that way because the U.S. government and the Soviet Union governments were just too embarrassed to reveal the truth that after the Second World War, that the Nazis had survived, that they had established a redoubt in Antarctica and had established fleets of flying saucers that were now working with the reptilians in deep space, and that the technology of the Germans in Antarctica was way ahead of anything that the US had. So that, for example, in 1952 you had the Washington flyover. Well, these were Nazi UFOs. So both the Truman and the Eisenhower administrations and every administration since has not announced it, because it would be tremendously embarrassing to say that, hey, we didn't win the Second World War after all. The Nazis survived. And in fact, out of their redoubt in Antarctica, they've been able to become more powerful than ever.
So the Nazis are still based at the South Pole in Antarctica?
What's happened is that in the 1950s and the 60s, agreements were reached between the Eisenhower administration and the German space program in Antarctica, where there was basically an integration of the U.S. military-industrial complex with what the Germans had achieved or had down there in Antarctica. And Project Paperclip was part of that kind of integration between the German space program and the U.S. military-industrial complex, so that so eventually there was a convergence, and rather than it being an exclusively Nazi base down in Antarctica, they now had U.S. corporations down there working with them. So it kind of became a hybrid German U.S. corporate set of facilities down in Antarctica.
Now, did Hitler escape Germany and fake his own death, or was there a different leader at this point?
He did escape Germany. He went to southern Argentina and became a figurehead for the Germans that were operating in Antarctica. He wasn't allowed to go to Antarctica because Hitler was never really in charge of the space program in Antarctica. That the German space program there was really run by the German secret societies and the industrialists, and that they used the Nazis to get the men and the equipment to build the bases in Antarctica, but never allowed Hitler and the Nazis to take control of it. So after the war, they arranged for Hitler to be given kind of refuge and figurehead status in southern Argentina, but he was not allowed to ever exercise any kind of policy over the German space program in Antarctica.
Now, you mentioned German secret societies. Are you referring to the Bavarian Illuminati?
Them, as well as others like the Fool Society, the Vril Society, the Black Sun Society, or the Order of the Black Stone. All of these esoteric societies had a hand in what was happening down in Antarctica, because the Germans understood very early on that the development and the use of advanced technologies was not merely a scientific project. It also required developing higher consciousness. And so this was something that the Germans began working on very early on. And with the German secret societies, that's why you had these kind of occult rituals, meditation, magic, sorcery. All of those things were kind of thrown in and combined with developing and using these kinds of advanced technologies.
Now, is there any truth to the rumors about a hollow Earth with openings at the poles?
I think that what is probably more accurate is a honeycomb Earth, where at least for the first 2,000 miles below the Earth's surface, like the Earth's crust, you have these huge caverns, huge pockets, where you have conditions that are hospitable for life. So you can have huge oceans down there with vegetation, with enormous populations, and that they are protected from the uncertainties of life on the surface of the planet. And I think that this is probably why we have these traditions of the inner Earth, of the Agathans, or of the Telosians, and of course the Thulians, the German version. That it's because in our ancient history, people on the surface who were threatened by some sort of planet-wide cataclysm, whether it's from an asteroid impact or solar flares, supernova type eruptions on the sun, that they could escape into the inner Earth's caverns and establish safe refuge down there, where they could basically bring all their most advanced technologies. And over the hundreds of thousands of years, they've been able to develop incredible technologies in the kind of honeycomb Earth.
How are these caverns accessed?
Well, I believe that there are many entrances or portals around the Earth. I don't think it's necessarily from the North Pole or the South Pole. It can be through some kind of lava tubes or kind of old volcanoes that have passageways going into the Earth's interior. Apparently, there's a vast underground cavern system. So once you are able to access that cavern system, then you can literally go for thousands and thousands of miles, virtually under any continent, and that these all join up in the Earth's interior. So yes, finding these entrances, once you've done that, that's the toughest part, but once you've found it, then it's pretty straightforward to be able to kind of access and go down into the inner Earth and travel through the cavern system there.
Do you think our government currently is accessing these caverns?
Oh, definitely, yes. So this is something that a number of whistleblowers have talked about, these cavern systems have been found, and they have created that a network has been created linking these vast underground spaces. In the United States, for example, we know from the testimony of Phil Schneider, who was a civil engineer from 1995-96 when he came forward, he referred to approximately 100 underground kind of bases, deep bases that had been built, which had approximately an average of, say, 10,000 personnel in each of these bases, and so over 100 of these were built in the United States alone, and that they were linked by magnetic levitation railway system that was able to travel through these cavern systems from one end of the country to the other, and that this is how they linked these 100 underground military bases all over the Earth, also all over the United States, that had been built in these cavern areas.
Well, I think it's time for us to decommission Air Force One.
Now, when you're mentioning these underground bases, is the whole Denver airport thing, is there an underground base located there?
That's what I'm told. That's what different whistleblowers have talked about, that Denver airport was created with this enormous underground city under it, and it was created as a kind of continuity of government facility, where if there was some kind of earth cataclysm that knocked out a lot of the surface of the United States, that this underground city under Denver airport would become the kind of base or the hub for continuity of government.
Now, this is going on a totally different tangent, but I read on your website I think you have a book on this, that Kennedy was assassinated over alien politics.
Yes, Kennedy was someone that knew a lot of this information, and during his administration, he launched a number of initiatives to try to get presidential control over this, because under Eisenhower, a lot of the control and the decision-making had been shifted out of the hands of the president and into the hands of an appointed committee called the Majestic 12 Committee. And Kennedy tried to reverse that, and he got pretty close to being able to have the kind of classified files dealing with these types of topics released, at least to the presidential administration. He wanted to kind of share that amongst the American bureaucracy and then decide, how much was going to be released to the American public. But in his final attempt to get control of these classified files, he was assassinated.
Well, your new book is the U.S. Navy's Secret Space Program and Nordic Extraterrestrial Alliance. So before we run out of time here, where exactly does this secret space program operate, and how large is it?
Sure. Well, there's two major space programs that need to be kind of considered here. One is run out of Area 51, and that's controlled by the U.S. Air Force. And the other one is located out of the Wasatch Mountains, the Dugway Proving Grounds. Underneath that, where they hold all of their kind of bacteriological tests. Underneath that are these vast construction sites underground, where they build enormous kilometre-long spacecraft that they launch into deep space that is part of a U.S. Navy space program. So you got one in the Wasatch Mountains that's run by the Navy, and another space program out of Area 51 that's run by the Air Force.
And do they have interstellar craft?
Not the Air Force. The Air Force program really just operates in near Earth orbit up to around 500 miles. They've created a kind of surveillance system and a defense grid for the Earth. But the Navy program operates in deep space, so they are able to operate, out there beyond Jupiter, beyond Neptune, into the Kuiper Belt. But that's about as far as they go.
So, to kind of sum it all up, what's the current alien ET agenda as far as what they want for Earth?
Well, I think there are some groups of extraterrestrials that want the truth to be revealed to humanity, so that it will help us raise our consciousness and be able to join the galactic community as full partners. There are other ET groups, though, that kind of want to keep us in a limited state of consciousness where we can be easily manipulated and used as a resource for their military expeditions, or in things like a slave trade, or as workers. So definitely there are conflicting agendas between ET groups, but I'm hoping that with this new Trump administration that they are going to move forward with disclosure, and that will help that kind of more positive ET vision come to fruit.
Now, you're going to be speaking in July at the MUFON Symposium in Las Vegas. Where can people buy tickets for that, or what info can you give for our audience if they want to come see you?
Sure. Well, they can go to my website, exopolitics.org, and there I've got a page where all the different upcoming events are listed, and that MUFON event in Las Vegas in July is going to be a pretty important one, because this is going to introduce this information to a worldwide community that is really wanting to learn about what's really happening up there. So definitely just go to the website, and you can register at the MUFON site for that conference, or for any other conferences that are coming up over the next few months.
Dr. Michael Salla, thanks for joining us on the show. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much.
Search Blackout with us on Facebook and Instagram. Back to Blackout with Samantha Scarlette and Eddie Barella.
So, wow, that was a crazy show.
Yeah. Some of the things a lot of interesting things have been said tonight. This has been one of our more interesting shows. I mean, they're all good, but this one I particularly liked.
Yeah, me too. I mean, the thing with Dr. Salla is like, you know, it's kind of far-fetched, a lot of the stuff he's saying, but the way he presents it, you know, it makes you wonder, is our government working with aliens? Like, I mean, I kind of could believe it.
I mean, he is a doctor.
Yeah, and then he approaches it in like such a way that it's like, I don't know. He kind of has me on the fence. Like, it's so crazy when you start to look into these conspiracies and stuff. The further down the rabbit hole you go, the more plausible and believable a lot of this stuff seems to be. So it's kind of a mind fuck.
Yeah. And
it was Chris Cuffaro was awesome too.
Yeah, really interesting, down to earth guy for all the stuff he's seen and all of the major names he's worked with. He was really approachable and really easy to talk to.
Yeah, no, he seems really nice, and everybody can go check out his stuff on cuffarophoto.com and cuffarohits.com, and I think definitely go to cuffarohits.com. Sorry, I can't look up the URL right now, but I know that's like one of his websites, and he has like so much stuff. You can go, his Instagram is Cuffaro Photo. I mean, just look him up. Look at his work. You can buy prints, I think, off the one website. His stuff's amazing. So definitely check it out.